That Joke Isn't Funny Anymore. Available on Amazon and everywhere. Hey guys, welcome back to the Lou Perez podcast. I'm your host, Lou Perez, and I am joined by Graham Linehan. He's, you might know him from his shows Father Ted, The IT Crowd, Black Books, and also, if you haven't caught it yet, he has a new book out called Tough Crowd. So Graham, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you. Very nice to be here.
Yeah. So one of the things that I want to start out, everyone who talks to you, they want to, talk about the controversy and
Sure.
all that. But I'm a comedian, and I'm a comedian in the States. So I'd like to talk about, comedy from the start and, how you got started in it. And I'm very interested in also the process of what it's like to produce comedy in Britain as opposed to other places in the world. So maybe we could start there. Your roots
Sure.
in the funny business.
Well, it was just kind of writing stuff for some friends who were doing a parody of U2. They had a band called the Joshua Trio. Sorry, the Joshua Trio. That was the joke. And Arthur Matthews, who was the drummer, used to play Father Ted at those things. Father Ted was his priest character who used to come out and say announcements to the audience and so on. And we just started writing there. I always thought Arthur was the funniest man I'd ever met. We were looking at TV and thinking, none of this is funny, and we can at least beat this, There was one particular show I remember that kept winning awards. Every year it won BAFTAs, and we were physically unable to watch it. We found it so annoying, So I eventually moved over to the UK to write music journalism, which I was already doing in Ireland, but I got an offer in the UK. And I just kind of eventually asked him to come over, and we started submitting sketches to as many places as we could until finally we got a bite, But it was a kind of mixture of arrogance, I guess. Also, I think I knew instinctively that, people talk about writing comedy, but everyone, very understandably, is scared of taking the step. And people say, "Oh, how do I get into the business?" and stuff like this. But it really was as easy as writing to the producer of a sketch show and just saying, "Do you want to see some of our stuff?" And not only did they like it, but they used like a bunch of sketches we had for the series we worked on. So yeah, that was it really. Just a kind of basic, tried it, got it,
Yeah, with the starting off with a YouTube, was it tribute band or cover band? I always thought, because I always heard about U2 and their very strong Catholicism, and just imagined all those poor groupies that they get to spend the night with the boys, and then the next morning, Sunday morning, they got to go to mass, confession and all that.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, they always had a bit of a kind of religious aspect to them, U2. So that's what the band were making fun of a lot of the time,
Yeah.
So I mean, we seem to like our holy characters in Ireland. It's gone from Bono to now the trans movement. So
yeah, we'll definitely get into to that, the transubstantiation of sorts. And what was it like? What's the relationship like? Being Irish and then making material for like English or British culture.
Yeah.
Is there much of a difference there?
No, I think we probably had a kind of a tonal quality that was unique, that was new to the audience in the UK. But for us, it was a very easy thing because, when we grew up, this reflection's driving me mad. When we grew up, we were, very influenced by America on one side and England on the other. So we got all the same influences that they were getting in the UK. So once we started writing, we were coming from a tradition of, British shows like The Young Ones and Blackadder and all these things. So yeah, it just fit right in. Like our first sitcom was a show called Paris, which was like a sitcom about a failed artist in Paris in the 1920s, and all of our jokes were kind of the same kind of anachronistic gags that Blackadder did. Like, we had one joke I remember where, because it's set in the 20s, one character says to another, they don't make films like they used to. Do you remember a train pulling into station? That was a movie. And people coming out of factory, classic. So, it was jokes like that. And that one sunk without a trace because we didn't really have the craft at that stage. So it was making Father Ted that really gave us the craft. We worked very closely with the producer. We chose all the actors. We were very influential in how the show looked. It was that kind of control that I realized you kind of need to have. I guess the equivalent in the US would be a showrunner. You need to be a showrunner if the stuff is going to be as funny as it is in your head. And the kind of comedy we were doing, which was very specific jokes, like you would have a character say something and the character would reply, but it would be very, this is a bad example, but just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, but it would be very important for the character who replies not to be seen in the shot, to be heard off screen. And then the joke works. If you see the person off screen, the joke suddenly doesn't work. So the way me and Arthur thought was like we were going from joke to joke to joke. Each one of them was very, very specific, had to be shot a certain way. So yeah, I just became a bit of a control freak, something that continues to this day.
Yeah. And did was that through like the BBC that you guys?
Channel 4.
Channel 4.
Yeah, which is was always supposed to be kind of the hip alternative to the BBC and ITV. And there was a while there when it was very good, Channel 4. It was it did some really innovative programming, but it's just kind of leveled out now and does the same stuff as everyone else over here.
Yeah, with obviously in the U.S. we have network television and cable TV. So there's a lot of private ownership of the studios and that sort of thing. But we also have public broadcasting that gets a good amount of money from the government. And for public broadcasting, I'm always wonder just how they go about choosing what shows get greenlit versus others. And a similar thing to like with when I see like comedies in Britain, like for example like Ricky Gervais's The Office. I'm like, how did that get through? Where it's like, okay, the public is going to fund this in some way, and I love the show, but it's like, what is that process like?
Well, we had this unusual kind of, because our first sitcom was such a disaster. I mean, the figures were terrible, the reviews were terrible. We were very surprised to go in and have the Irish comedy commissioner in Channel 4 ask us to have another go. It was a real show of faith, ironically enough. And they just kind of, I don't know, there were all sorts of, I really couldn't speak to it in a way because like I've never been someone who had to. I know a lot of writers who do things like they have to think about, the way the market is going, or they have to think about a certain commissioner and stuff like this, or how to pitch things, or what people are interested in at the moment. And the channels will send out things that say we want this type of product or this. I never really paid attention to any of that. I was always my thing has always been, if people are doing one thing, you should do the opposite. And when the Office came into fashion, when the style in the Office came into fashion, I really dug my heels in and wanted to stick with studio sitcoms, because I just thought, well, now everyone's going to do the documentaries with the interviews, and if you want to stand out from all that, you have to do the opposite. So I've never really been part of the system in the sense of doing what executives wanted me to do. And it worked out really well until recently, where I kind of hit a brick wall. But it was just a question of following my nose and always trying to go in the opposite direction to everyone else. Because if there's 5 programs on where you reveal character by having interviews with the characters, then you don't want to be the 6th. you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's probably people who are more part of the system who could speak to what the daily jobbing life of a comedy writer is like in the UK. But I was always, you know, we got lucky. Our first proper sitcom, the one that we paid attention to, won a BAFTA. And so after that, we were kind of golden boys, you know, so we could write, we could do anything we wanted, you know.
Yeah. With, I don't think, for anyone who hasn't, there are a lot of people, obviously there are a lot more viewers than there are people actually trying to write. And, you know, writing a multicam sitcom versus, you know, a single cam like The Office is really tough. I mean, where everything has to be popping, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I love it. You know, it's a real, you have to be on your toes. You can actually hear while you're filming the episode, the audience not go for something, you know?
Yeah.
So you have to have a quick conflab and say, they didn't go for it. Why didn't they go for that? And you have to fix it on the hoof. And I loved all that. It was very stressful. That was the only thing. Like US studio sitcoms, they have 2 nights to film everything. I believe Friends would film on Friday or something and then come back the next day and reshoot the whole episode with a different audience.
Oh,
now
wow.
that was like that would have been like luxury for us, you know. What we had was like we had 1 3-hour section to film everything in front of the audience, and if we didn't get it, it would be pushed on to the next week, and that would make the next week too long, and we wouldn't get something on that week, and it would push it up. It was just so stressful and unpleasant, but you know, I enjoyed it. It made us write more jokes. It gave the performances a kind of heightened aspect that I always love. I think, you know, one of my favorite performances in a sitcom, maybe not the best sitcom, but one of the best performances was John Lithgow in Third Rock from the Sun. You know, like that's how I like my sitcom actors. You know, it's almost like pantomime, you know, jokes get really landed on, you know, and again, and I saw it again recently also, another brilliant sitcom actress, although she made her name on it, but then went on to be, you know, considered the great actress that she is Laurie Metcalf in Roseanne.
Oh, yeah.
You know, just an extraordinary performance. And really all she's doing is acting naturally. But because it's a studio sitcom, she has to pause. She has to feed off the audience. She has to kind of surf along where the audience is going. They all did that brilliantly in that show. And yeah, it just gives it a different flavor. And it's an exciting thing to me to it feels almost like a high wire act, you know? It's like, I think this is funny. You have something in your head, an image, you think it's funny, you think it works, and then you show it to an audience and they agree, and it's the best feeling in the world, you know?
Yeah. I years back, I saw Laurie Metcalf in a live production of Stephen King's Misery.
Wow.
So she obviously played, you know, the Kathy Bates, you know, character, and it was with Bruce Willis was the author.
Right.
He was awful. He was terrible. And knowing now what I think he was battling, the aphasia, things start to make sense, because I remember hearing that he had like an earpiece where the director would, you know, or someone would feed him lines and all that. But Laurie Metcalf was just phenomenal. I mean, you know, I could watch her just do anything by herself.
Yeah.
And, you know, the live audience component is, it's I guess it's hard to explain to people who don't, you know, haven't performed live. But I got started in improv comedy and live sketch comedy. So you're in front of a crowd. If something lands, you hear it. If it doesn't, you know, then it sucks. It's the worst.
Yeah.
And then in around like 2008, 2009, I transitioned more to making stuff for YouTube, you know, making film sketches. And you forget that, you know, there's an audience there, you know, but they're, you know, somewhere else in the world watching this. So the few times the times when I get to screen videos that were made specifically for, you know, online in front of an audience and actually hearing them laugh. So sometimes like you'll hear them laugh and they will laugh over another joke line.
Oh yeah.
And, and then it's like, if we were, working it as a live thing, it would be, we would, tinker with the timing and stuff like that. But it's filmed and you're screwed. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way we filmed our studio sitcoms is that, and I think it's similar in the US, is if there's any location stuff, we have to do that. We film that beforehand, and then we show it to the audience in studio order, if that makes sense. Or sorry, in story order. So they're seeing the story play out as close to what it'll be like for the audience at home as possible. But often when you play this stuff from the location, they do exactly that. They laugh over a key joke, or they laugh over a bit of information. So I used to go out to them and I used to say, do me a favor, don't laugh at that joke again. Just be quiet for that joke and then laugh at the joke after it. And so you would, or then, I wouldn't say laugh at the joke after it, but I would say, because the joke after it's really good. And then they would go dead silent over where they used to laugh, and they'd hear the big line and explode. And those are the kind of moments I like capturing. And those are the kind of things I used to get really annoyed when people said we used a laughter track or canned laughter and stuff, because we worked so hard to get these laughs. We really pulled out all the stops.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that, about laugh tracks, because there are some sitcoms you listen to and it seems like they have the exact same audience as all these sitcoms are using the exact same audience. But if you watch old episodes of Cheers, it's like that is a live audience. Like there's no faking that whatsoever.
Absolutely. But I know they sweeten things and so on. And, but like, you can kind of tell sometimes, like I saw an episode of Friends where they were talking, I think I saw it after they talked about sweetening laughter and doing certain manipulative things. And, the jokes, the audience is laughing, but they're like they're like ghost jokes. They're not really eliciting that kind of laughter. But like, even then, they used the real audio. I don't get why people still think the laughter is canned when there's countless videos of like blooper reels of them messing about on set and the live audience laughing there. It's like, do you think they're faking that as well? Why would they do that? But yeah, it's just one of those things. They come with their own good things and their own bad things, But I have to say, in the end, I think there's a kind of a magic dust that you get with studio audiences that you can really see again in Roseanne. Like in Roseanne, I know you probably remember there's some episodes of Roseanne where they really go at it. The arguments are vicious,
Mm-hmm.
And just like when you hear the audience laugh and it's appropriate, you can hear the audience suddenly go dead quiet. Right. Yeah. And you can feel them holding their breath. It's so dramatic. And it's kind of like being in a cinema, I always say that, it's just such a shame we're losing the cinema. I think we are losing it. I don't think maybe it can come back. But at the moment, I know that like films are in a bit of free fall in terms of when they're released into the cinema, like the latest Mad Max movie, for instance, I believe isn't doing very well. And it's a great shame because I remember, we were talking about Misery, I just remember the moments in Misery where you're kind of sometimes wondering if the audience is going with it. You're wondering whether the audience is bored, maybe, because they're so quiet. And then they laugh at a key thing or they gasp at something, and you realize, oh my God, they feel exactly the same way I do.
Yeah.
That's a lovely feeling. And it kind of, you were, again, sorry, I'm making all these callbacks, but you were talking about Mass early on. And it's an audience, there's a fellowship and a kind of shared understanding of humanity that I really feel we need to get more of rather than less of, but it's drifting away and no one's doing anything to stop it,
When I was a devout Catholic and would attend Mass, my favorite part should have been receiving the Eucharist. It should have been that, obviously. But my favorite part was turning to everyone and saying, peace, peace be with you. Peace be all with you. And that was like, that real human connection there.
Absolutely.
That I really missed,
And always those freaking wafers would stick to the roof of your mouth, and you had to dislodge them with the tip of your tongue. They were disgusting.
And then
You
the
know?
wine was never that good. There was never a
Who wants to
sommelier.
drink from a cup that loads of other people are drinking from? The whole thing was kind of grim, you know.
Yeah. What do you think is been the downfall of the cinema? Because for me, I don't know if I've gotten older and just more easily annoyed, but there's been a time when I would go to the movies, and the amount of people who just don't know to shut up, to get off your phone and all that. I went. I was at a movie some years back. It was one of the X-Men movies, and there was a woman. She was on a date with a guy, and they were talking, and I was behind them, and I just went shh, shh multiple times, and it was around the third time she turned around. She said, "What do you mean shush? You're in a movie theater." So somehow I was the asshole for not talking. So that.
Yeah, and you know what, though? I'll tell you what it is as well as the kind of increasing atomization of people. People don't know how to behave in certain situations. They're not used to it, But like part of the problem, though, is they're not making movies worth shutting up for. Like you see, like Marvel. I don't know, but I find Marvel. I gave up watching Marvel movies a few years ago. I used to bring my kids to them, but then they just became so repetitive, and I just gave up. And why wouldn't you talk during a movie that's rehashing the same story you've seen a million other times? Some invasion, millions of creatures, so that you can see different ones, different superheroes doing different things. It just became so formulaic, and the filmmakers are not demanding you respect the story because they're not giving you enough to work with. You see a film like David Mamet's The Verdict, fucking hell, you stay quiet during that. You're locked to the screen, and there's so many films that are like that. They seem to command your respect. They seem to command your silence, but a lot of films. Like I remember I went to see a film, Hairy-Legged Freaks, I think it was, when I was still a film reviewer. This must be about 30 years ago now, And it was about giant spiders attacking people. And there were people talking behind me, and I went shh like that. And they were like, they did the same thing that those guys did to you. But with me, I realized later, you know what? It isn't really a movie that, one could go shh during. It's a movie about giant spiders attacking people. What are you trying to hear? So I think that the problem is there's and that's why streaming is such it's such a mixed thing, because it's lovely to sit at home and watch a film and turn off all your phones and not be interrupted and not have anyone speak during it and know you're going to be completely immersed. It's a shame that that's not guaranteed elsewhere. But I think it's partly also because, cinemas, there's fewer and fewer people working in them. Same way that you get in our local supermarket, like all the tellers are now automated, and one person working behind the counter who's completely confused by every question they get. And it's like a kind of it's just, again, the cinemas thought, we'll save a bit of money and we won't hire as many people. But of course, then you have a situation where people don't feel they have to be quiet because there's no one telling them to be quiet. Yeah. And I don't know. If only we ruled the world, then things would be much better, wouldn't they?
Yeah. Well, I'll have the world know that since I have a 4-year-old and a 2.5-year-old, I have seen the movie Migration, the animated film, 4 times.
Oh, really?
Let me get on camera 4 times in the theater, and it is not a good movie.
Oh, really? Are they forcing you to go to it?
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. Especially when we're driving, my son will, the youngest one will point out that that's the movie theater. So it's Kung Fu, it's Migration and Kung Fu Panda. That's the one that we have to see.
Yeah.
So I need to change the way that I'm driving so we don't go by the the movie theater.
Yeah.
With
someone said recently the church of cinema is dead, which I thought was a good way of putting it. It's like that time when you I would listen to Martin Scorsese talking about films, and I would try and find every film he spoke about and stuff like that. And then, as you get older, you find some of those films and you're like, this is a bit boring, or whatever. And you lose a little bit of your respect. And also critics who, I don't know, at one point, I would read critics with, these guys know what they're talking about. And as you get older, you realize, a lot of them don't, a lot of them are just, generic, they could be reviewing washing machines, Yeah. So I don't know. It's all so dispiriting sometimes, but,
was it tough for you as a critic? Because as a critic, but you're also a writer, so you're also creating stuff. Does that change the way you approach the criticism? Because one thing, I do stand up, and I'm kind of hesitant to come out and bash stand up specials, because I know how hard it is to do it. And
sure.
There's a lot of footage of me on stage with a microphone, and I am utter shit. So
right.
It's, I wish those things didn't exist.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no. With criticism, it was great because I was able to kind of put some of my theories into practice. I was able to react against some of the stuff I was seeing that was very low rent or easy laughs and stuff like that. And also, I think the other useful thing about being a critic was that I was kind of very aware of the audience experience. Sometimes you could write something and it reads great to you, you're very happy with it, but you hand it to someone and they go, why did he do this? And you go, oh, well, because he did that. And they go, oh, I didn't realize they did that. And you're like, oh. And so you kind of see everything. I would see the TV shows or whatever we were working on. I would see the image. I would just see the image and the progression of the joke. I wouldn't see. I would always try and make sure, because there's so many things that can go wrong in a joke. Mm-hmm. Very early on we had a sketch, and it wasn't a great sketch, but it had at least a point, which was two women who keep interviewing kind of doctors who've written books, and they can never talk to them about the books. They just kind of talk about their, how good looking they are, how much they're earning. So it was a kind of a very simple reversal, sexism reversal, right? But then we got to the set, and the actor who's playing the doctor had a jumper tied around his top, like he was a kind of wasp going to play tennis or something. And it was like, no, the idea is that he doesn't find himself. He's not trying to sell his attractiveness. So the whole kind of reasoning behind the sketch just went out the window. It made no sense. And this was a whole team who had rehearsed it all week, watched it being filmed, chose the costumes, did all that, and they never thought once, hang on a sec, this sketch doesn't make any sense. So that's kind of what I'm good at, I think, is like making sure that whatever we write, there's an audience in mind. You know what I mean?
Yeah. With your previous shows, are they still being shown in the UK?
I think you can find most of them on Apple or something like that. Channel 4 has banned one episode of the IT Crowd because of the scandal. But apart from that, yeah, it's fairly business as usual, really.
So out of 100, great. So out of hundreds of episodes, you got one that's no one will ever see again. That's not a bad ratio, I guess.
Well, no, I mean, luckily you can still see it on streaming services, I think. But it is one of the best episodes, and I mean, they don't care because I'm cancelled anyway. But I'll never work for Channel 4 again until they reinstate it. It's so ridiculous. There's nothing wrong with the episode at all, and when they wrote a letter to me about it, it was just full of talking points that I recognized from Stonewall, which is the big LGBT charity over here, which has been completely corrupted by gender ideology. And so I read this letter and thought, none of this is true. There's increasing violence against trans people. Not true. It was just based on nonsense. So, yeah. So my feeling is, unless they reverse that, I've no interest in them, you know.
What was the what happens in the episode?
It was the episode where Matt Berry falls in love with a woman who turns out to be a man, or turns out was once a man, and also it had a brilliant plot line where Jen believes that the internet is in a box that is in the IT crowd office. And she's terrified of breaking it, you know. So yeah, it's a good episode, you know. So I'm very particularly annoyed that they got rid of it.
Yeah, there was a recent episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm that it goes the other way, where Larry.
Oh, I saw.
Larry had a fling with this chick a while ago. And then she's transitioned to a man, and she's calling out like how great he was in bed and all that. And she's a a bald guy with a beard.
Yeah, that's very funny. It's very funny. It's a great idea. Yeah, no, that's a nice approach to it. You know, my approach to it was much more, you know, because as I say, the good and the bad of sitcoms. Mine was much more bizarre and over the top, and it ended with a big Matrix style fight between the two characters. So yeah, I've always gone for slightly more sledgehammer type comedy at certain times, you know.
Well, with the Matrix, I mean, the Matrix reference, I mean, they went from, you know, the brothers to the sisters, I guess.
I know, yeah.
Sisters, right?
There you go. I had no idea that was going on when I wrote it, but there's all sorts of little.
A friend of mine pointed out that you'll notice that the Matrix was better when men were writing it.
Yeah. Shane Gillis was very funny about it. He was like talking about the Matrix. He says, a chick didn't write that movie.
and it is funny how the whole, like, you know, red pilled, blue pilled thing comes out of
I know,
you know, specifically.
It's crazy, isn't it? And interestingly enough, there was a story about the Wachowskis that Rolling Stone wrote that pointed out that the origins of all their shenanigans with cross-dressing and stuff came because they were part of a kind of underground scene of sex clubs in LA, you know, and that story disappeared from the Rolling Stone website, you know.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We put it back up on my one, you know, because I didn't want, you know, I mean, they're trying to rewrite history so that, you know, there's no association with the fetish side of things. But the fetish side of things is a major part of the new kind of trans movement, you know. But anyway, we're skipping ahead again. Sorry.
Yeah. Let me see. Yeah. So obviously, with with the controversies and your cancellation and all that, have you have you seen like a backlash from fans of yours, or has it been from the suits and at the
no fans? Well, when you say backlash, do you mean against me or in my favor?
Against you.
Oh, well, in the early days there was a lot of fans who opposed it, but now that's completely switched, and people, I think, have woken up to how crazy some of the demands are and how unfair some of the situations are. So the people who used to send me proper abuse, they're not getting an easy time anymore. They're getting a lot of pushback. So it's great. The fans have always been there for me in one form or another. Their numbers certainly shrunk, but now these days it's much better kind of discourse, so to speak, because people send you just dogs abuse, but I don't see it because I don't accept replies from people who don't follow me. Mm-hmm. So all I see are my own followers sticking up for me. So that's
the way to do it.
Yeah. So it's nice,
Well, with your case and also with, say, like J.K. Rowling, well, what I find interesting are the people in Rowling's situation where they, absolute fans of her work, but they want to erase her from the work. Like if they could make it so that 50 years from now nobody knows who wrote Harry Potter, that's what they would do. And it's a very pathetic thing, because it's like, look, you might disagree with this person on this issue, but that does not take away the huge impact that they have or their artistic abilities, and in your case as well.
Also, like, the thing with Rowling is that every single one of her books is about doing the right thing, standing up to your friends, being brave, all these things, and the trans movement is the opposite to all of these things. You know, they target women, they target. You know, I have one disabled woman who gets terrible abuse. Sorry, as a follower, who gets terrible abuse. All she's arguing for is the dignity of being able to ask for a female carer. You know, she's nonverbal. She's completely paralyzed. Twitter is the only way she can communicate with people. And she gets abuse. You know, she gets the most vicious, vile abuse, you know, including people making fun of her condition. So these are dreadful people, trans activists. You know, they really are the worst the internet has ever coughed up. And they're, you know, all these J.K. Rowling fans supposedly took their side. You know, it could not have been a more clear battle of good versus evil, you know. So I think part of the problem as well is that, you know, J.K. Rowling, she is rightly lauded, and she should be, for keeping reading alive for several generations of kids. But unfortunately, it does seem like a lot of the kids who read her books haven't read anything else. You know, and really the what they should have done to be whole good people is gone on to read other things, you know, Dostoevsky or fucking Tolstoy or something like that. Anything that would broaden their experience of life. But one of the problems with the trans movement is it's very stunted in terms of its. You notice that a lot of the people who support trans rights, they dress in very childish clothes like dungarees and stuff like that. There's a real kind of arrested development thing. And with Rowling, she was basically asking her audience to grow up and think like adults about an issue, and they just can't do it, you know.
Yeah, the what was the I guess what was the spark, you know, when it comes to how'd you bring this upon yourself, Graham?
Yeah, sure.
How'd you do this? What did you do wrong? Yeah.
Well, you know, I just started noticing that people were calling women TERFs, and they were attaching that word to a lot of threats of violence and rape. And I thought, well, this is terrible. God, this has to be stopped. And as soon as I started defending those women, I started coming under fire, you know. And I was sued by a trans activist who also called the police on me. Something The Guardian reported with great glee. The Guardian's completely captured, you know. It's a similar thing that I believe is in the US, which is that, you know, we have a media class who's just trying to shut down all discussion, trying to shut down every piece of information about it, to such an extent that the Cass review, which has completely transformed the way people think about it in the UK, hasn't even been reported on in the US. And the UK media won't report on it very much either. The BBC is trying to ignore it. The BBC completely ignored the WPATH files, which are an extraordinary whistleblowing document. So I basically just found myself trying to fight back against these evil people who were harassing and intimidating and posting violent threats to women, while at the same time, my reputation was being destroyed by the same media who were trying to shut down the conversation. So every time I thought, oh, this will explain it, you know, or like I would point to things thinking, oh, now everyone will see I'm a nice guy, you know, and I would point to things like sport. You know, look, they're beating women in sport, and then you would point to things like the gender clinics. Look, they're mutilating happy gay kids. Sorry, I try not to use that word. Maiming happily gay kids. And every time I thought, oh, this will do it. This will make people see that they need to think about this properly, and it just never happened. And every time I have a phrase like I would point to things, and people would look at my finger, because the conversation is always about my conduct or my language. And it's like, well, what about the language of people sending death threats to children's authors? None of that is ever talked about. So it's a tough fight. Even today, I had another piece come out that just completely the journalist just didn't understand the issue. And it's exhausting. It's pretty exhausting, you know. That's coupled with a Wikipedia page that we can't change. Like that's like just literally lying about me. Like, for instance, there was one trans activist in the UK. He's in Scotland, and he was running a rape crisis centre. Didn't tell the rape crisis centre that he was a man when he joined up. And he said that I doxed him, and we looked at what he meant by this, because I'm very careful to cover up addresses if I share documents and so on.
Right.
We looked at what we meant, and we had his address that it was covered up, except for the word Scotland. So that's what he said I was doxing him by, because I said he was somewhere in Scotland, So and that then gets onto my Wikipedia page as he doxed a trans woman. So what can you do? I for the last few years, I've just been kind of like, I try and correct the record. I try and make people understand what's going on, but I'm just facing a bunch of journalists who, they're what I call midwits. They're just not smart enough. They're like the kind of great. I think we know that in everything there's always a few great people, a few terrible people, and in the middle a great kind of morass of. I don't know if that's the right word. I don't know if I'm using morass correctly. But a kind of, what word am I looking for? But a great kind of middle of people with very average skills, and they're too lazy to look into issues. They're too lazy to think properly about things. And yeah, it's just exhausting. It's exhausting. You can't win against it. So I've had to kind of accept that I am now a hated figure. And I just have to live with it. I have to figure out some way of living with it,
So, so you wrote a book. Your book, Tough Crowd. It's out now and available everywhere. Over these past few years, have you been able to do comedy as well, or has Tough Crowd, the book, been your focus?
I did a little bit of stand-up to give it a go, because I just thought I wanted to exercise those muscles again and try and write jokes. And I've done enough of it to know that I don't think I should do it, because it's like, yourself, you have to die a million times. You have to find out how to deal with audiences that are too spread out or too close to the stage or too far away from the stage. I don't have the time. I'm 56 years old now, so I don't really have the time to kind of embark on a new craft. I was happy to do it and to write a few funny jokes and to get an idea of how it feels, but I don't think it's something I want to do. Something about telling jokes that I've told before. I find that really annoying. It's like, it's one of the toughest things to get used to is there are jokes that I've been telling for like 8 years. Right.
And I need to make them new for me. Yes. Every time I tell them, and then it hurts when they don't work, and it's like, well, I've been doing it for 8 years. It's worked in every other room. What the hell's what's
that's
going
it?
On here?
It's things like that, and it's like you don't really know what the magic thing was that meant the joke didn't work that time. So how do you fix it? How do you make sure it works next time? Now that's something that you, as a working comedian, can afford to and should spend time investigating. But it's not going to work for me. I actually quite like getting onto a stage and just talking to people,
Yeah, I was going to say, I can imagine you, doing kind of like the equivalent of like a one-man show, lecture, stories, and
an evening with. We've been kind of experimenting with that, and it's been working out quite well, So I like doing that, and and sometimes I even take out my phone and I read out some of the jokes that I made up in my comedy writing phase, or in my stand-up phase. So nothing's ever wasted.
And were you developing a musical at some point?
Yeah, the Father Ted musical, which is what the piece was about today that came out, which completely got it wrong. Yeah, and it was ready to go. It was in really good shape. All the songs were written. And they just said that they wanted me not to do it, and they'd give me $200,000 not to do it. So I said no, because for various reasons, including what was the one I was thinking of today? They didn't say that really annoyed me. Oh yeah, including the fact that, like, you know, they told me that I couldn't even come to see rehearsals. You know, I couldn't come to see the show developing. So I told them, you know, there was that, and there were other reasons, but I told them to stick it after a while, you know, and yeah, I mean, they're just, I don't know. What can you do? What can you do? No one was able to tell me what I've done wrong either. They always talk about conduct and stuff like that. And then when they bring up the specific things, never gets that far actually. But when people do bring up the specific things that you're supposed to have done, there's always reasoning behind it. There's always kind of thought behind it. You know, one of the things that people throw at me is that I use the word groomer, but it is grooming. Telling kids that they were born in the wrong body, that's grooming, you know? Mm-hmm. And so it's outrageous to me that you have BBC presenters and comedians who are continuing to tell this terrible lie to children, you know? A lie that in many cases can lead to, you know, things like we found out this week that young women who've been on testosterone for a number of years, they're getting menopause symptoms at the age of 28. So they're going into the menopause. They've been told that they will turn into young men, and they're turning into old women. You know, so it's not something that should be encouraged. It's not something that should be that people like Neil Gaiman and Russell T Davis and David Tennant should be promoting. And yeah, it's the correct language. You know,
yeah, it is interesting how, you know, words are treated the same way that actions are. You know, the idea of, you know, you using the word groomer, you know, rightly or wrongly, pales in comparison to the idea of sterilizing a child. There's no equivalence whatsoever.
That's it. You know, or putting a fully intact sex offender in a women's prison, which is happening so much now that it's no longer even a story. You know, and also, you know, when they report on it, they use female pronouns for these male sex offenders. So a person reading it casually won't have a clue what happened. They'll think there's suddenly an epidemic of female on female violence, you know? So it's stuff like that. I refuse to take it lying down. It's breaking our connection with reality. And I'm still astonished that so many journalists go along with it, you know? You see Eddie Izzard's new review. He's got a new one-man Hamlet on, and people are calling it a one-woman Hamlet, you know, and using she, her pronouns throughout. And it's like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? You know, you don't. Even Eddie Izzard says you can use any pronouns you like for me. So why are people pretending? Why pretend people using female pronouns? You know, for me, it's maddening because it's like instant revisionism, right? I used to be very against revisionism when it came to Holocaust revisionism. You know, I always thought that was one of the greatest sins you could do, you know, and now we're seeing it happen. Like the words go on the page and are immediately untrue, like Eddie Izzard's one woman show, you know? So it's like breaking reality. And all that means is that it'll be easier for truly bad actors to be able to do that moving forward. Sorry, not that I'm getting a bit, I'm not saying bad actors in the sense of acting. I'm saying
Eddie Izzard is a fantastic actor, ladies and gentlemen. We do not want, you know, we're not throwing shade his way for that.
Well, I don't know. I think he's a more convincing woman than he is an actor. But like he like, if someone can tell a lie like that, right? Then if a new despot gets in, well, you know, how will we know the difference? How will we know when we're being told the truth or not? When you have even Snopes, with their whole brand of Snopes is that they tell the truth and they figure out what's really true about a certain situation. And they're going along with all this stuff as well. It's like, well, you're lying, you know, you're telling lies. So I don't know. It's I'm going blue in the face trying to get across how important this issue is, but no matter how many times I explain it, no one seems to take it seriously. And it's dismissed as a culture war, you know? Mm-hmm. So it's it's very frustrating. Anyway, I don't know where to
last year I produced a sketch comedy video called "Misgendering a Murderer," where I played the female murderer. And this I did no makeup. This is exactly what you saw there. And one of the jokes, towards the end was the detective comes out and says, you got to let her go because they found male semen on the body, not female semen.
Yeah.
And then somebody tagged me on Twitter not too long ago, and in an article, there was female semen was being used, and I was like, you got to be freaking kidding me. And obviously, all the examples of women getting pregnant in prison, from male-bodied people.
There's footage I saw yesterday of a woman who she goes up to some protesters outside and she's in floods of tears because her daughter has just come second to a bloke in a race. And she's distraught and saying thank you to these women for protesting and saying that her daughter, and I met one woman who said that her daughter was a jiu-jitsu champion or was doing very well in it. She's just given up the sport because, why train? Why train if a mediocre man can come in and just win a medal? Why do anything? So they're literally telling these young women that their efforts, their work means nothing. I don't understand how people. I don't get it. Why how has it got as far as it's got? It kills me every day.
and it is interesting the subjects that people are told to shut up about and the ones that they're told to speak out against, right? Mm-hmm. So, a young woman losing a championship, a trophy, a scholarship, basically, ruining all the hard work that she does. Shut up about that, shut up about it. But, other, and I'm trying to think of what other topics it might be. It's like, shout from the rooftops. If a man asks you for your phone number,
yes, yes, absolutely. And today, I think there's something where they're wearing bracelets to represent period poverty or something like that. And everyone's just replying to them, you don't know what a woman is. You can't talk about period poverty. They're so short-sighted, these people. They don't realize that if you deny fundamental truths, right, it's going to bite you in the arse. It's going to be like, the way Trump, I mean, I don't want to add to Trump's woes. But the way Trump used to tell so many lies that he would get mixed up which one he's told, and it would be hard for him to. That's the problem with telling lies. You never know and this particular lie that there's more than two sexes, that people can be born into the wrong body, it reverses everything. I often say that putting the word trans in front of the word woman, it means trans in this sense means not, right? So a trans woman is not a woman, okay? So when you have a kind of a agreed upon reality that completely inverts what reality is, then you notice that the trickle down effects of that is that people just stop being able to do their jobs. Comedians aren't able to do colleges anymore, because it's such a oppressive experience with the audiences they have now. Fucking safeguarding can't be done because, somehow these men are exempt from safeguarding because they say that they're a woman. It's everything. Journalists can't tell the truth. Everything is just reversed. And the other aspect to it is that comedy becomes much harder to do because what is the agreed upon reality that we are supposed to be subverting with comedy, right? Mm-hmm. If reality is actually determined by each individual, then how the hell do you write effective comedy? You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's an American comedian named Ian Fidance, and Ian he had a thread. He recorded. I think it's either his first special or a new special, and he did this whole bit. Ian is he is attractive and he dates trans women. Right. He's very open about that, and he does this bit about what it's like dating a trans woman and how much he loves it and all that. And here I always say, like, if you're if you want to prove that you're a real ally, you should probably have sex with the subject of your allyship. And Ian, definitely does that. He's a very, very funny guy.
Yeah.
And if you look at the comments, there's a lot of trans people who are upset with him and accusing him of being a transphobe or just accusing him of all these things. And it's like, you can't fucking win.
There's no right answer. They make up the rules as they go along. Yeah. Someone called it a brilliant thing. Someone called the rules when it comes to trans ideology Calvin Ball. Do you remember Calvin Ball in Calvin and Hobbes?
I know the reference, but I'm not.
Calvin and Hobbes invented this game called Calvin Ball that just had millions of rules that made no sense. They were completely contradictory and meant that either of them were always the winner, right? It was just basically arguing, okay? Constant argument between the two of them about the rules. And that's what trans ideology is. It's Calvin Ball. So one second you're told it's mental illness, the next it's not mental illness. It's probably offensive to say it's a mental illness. One second you're told that these kids desperately need puberty blockers if they're going to be happy. Then you're told, well, puberty blockers, they don't necessarily need to be used. Transsexuals, are they people who get their genitals removed, or aren't they? There's no rhyme or reason to any of these anything in this system of thought. So yeah, he's even touching this subject. And I think that's why you notice a lot of people are just dead silent about it and don't approach it in any way. The vast majority of people. It's because they recognize that. They recognize that there's no winning. There's no winning in this fight, Yeah.
And also, it being, Twitter and online, anybody, like the chances of anybody responding to something that you write, there's a good chance that a lot of them are going to be, nutcases. Anyway, so then it's sort of like you take, the trans, cohort who are going to be responding, they're going to be nutcases, responding to that. It sort of just feeds, it feeds that animal.
Oh, yeah, and it's like one of the things I do have sympathy for is I do think there's a lot of troubled people who are identifying as trans, and they're identifying as trans for a number of different reasons. In the Tavistock, the gender clinic over here, they found out that a lot of the kids who were coming in were gay. A lot of the kids who were coming in had suffered abuse or were autistic. And they're not going to be the most together people when they're replying to you as well. So it's this odd situation where instead of addressing mental illness, we've made a religion of it. And I'm very worried what the consequences are going to be in a few years. Like those girls, for instance, I was telling you, they're 28 years old and they've got postmenopausal symptoms. That's like incontinence. So they're going to be incontinent from the age of 30 onwards. It's like, what is the effect going to be on them when they realize that it was a con? It was a terrible lie. They were told that if they take these drugs, they'll become happy males. I dread to think what the consequences of that are going to be.
Yeah, and I don't think enough attention is paid to just like the physical realities, like you just described. I think there are a lot of people who think that the science has advanced so much that you're basically turning into the opposite sex without any of the downside. And someone who I had on my podcast a little while back, Exu Lansik is her. I love her. Is her handle. She's great, but it could be tough to watch a lot of her stuff because she goes into what happens under these surgeries and fortunately, I think there are a lot of trans people who have gone through these surgeries who are posting about their physical realities post surgery. And it's a lot of it, it's gruesome. The stuff that I've seen. So even if you have someone, say, for example, who is an adult, they are totally there and they want to go through, this transition. If they, quote unquote, go all the way with it, that doesn't mean that their troubles are over. They're potentially opening up another can of worms there, which is sad.
They'll never stop going to the hospital. There'll be like I got cancer, which I wrote a little bit about in the book, but I didn't write much about it because it wasn't actually that significant for me. It was a very simple operation to get.
You're upsetting a lot of your critics now. They're like, God.
Yeah, exactly. I had 2 sessions of chemo, and they didn't make my hair fall out or anything like that. But the thing I did find from my little dance with cancer is I don't like going to hospitals. They're not fun places to go. All of these young women will be going to hospitals for the rest of their lives, and there's so many different things associated with it. Like, for instance, if I found out that like women on testosterone are 4 times more likely to have a heart attack than men are. 4 times, Jeez. So it's and also another thing I found out that like, did you ever hear Ellen Elliott Page speak? Ellen Page now has that kind of croaky voice whenever she talks. That's because the testosterone makes her vocal cords swell up, and her neck is too slender to take care of it. So for a lot of women, if you go on one of these female to male subreddits, which I don't do, but a lot of people I know do, they say that there's huge discussions about throat pain because they've all got throat pain. They've all got those croaky voices because their vocal cords have swollen to such an extent. So none these kids are not being told these facts. It's just being left for them to discover it. So yeah, it's a medical scandal, but it's also a scandal. It's a journalism scandal as well, because journalists should have been reporting on all this, and they've been nowhere near the scene of the crime,
Yeah, I have a friend, Jesse Single, who
he hates me.
Oh, does he hate you? Oh no, I'm sorry to hear that. Well, hopefully I can bring you two together. But I know he years back he wrote something. I think it might have been in the Atlantic, about this, trying to give a fair presentation of what the science said at the time, and he ever since then he's been after him.
I was a great supporter of him. I was supporting him all through that stuff, and then he turned around and did exactly what everyone else has done to me in this fight, and it was because I went on to a dating app for lesbians, changed my pronouns, and got accepted onto the app.
Oh wait, that was you?
Yeah. And it was like I did it literally to show that men were doing it for real. And again, Jesse and Katie Herzog just basically looked at my finger rather than the problem I was pointing out. And I think that unfortunately there's still a kind of all these people like Jesse and Katie, I think they still want to be accepted by the kind of media that has decided that they're bigots, And it's like, why do you? And so they do things like they observe pronouns, and it's like, why do you do this? Why don't you just be truthful and try and bring an end to this? But I don't know. It's not easy allyship, as I was told years ago. Someone said that to me, and it's proved true.
Did you have any luck on that lesbian dating app?
No, I didn't. But you should have. The blokes who were joining it. Like they made even less. I tilted my head at least.
I've seen the pictures, and of the types of guys that do it, and I'm like, there's like no attempt to.
There's no attempt, and even if there was an attempt, it would still be bad. I mean, these are lesbian spaces, and these men are invading them. There's a great phrase that I use to try and explain to the situation to people: the good men stay out, so the bad men stand out. And really, any man who wants to enter a woman-only space should automatically be disqualified from doing so, because it's abusive,
Yeah. The years ago there was an R&B singer. Oh God, what was it? He sang a song like "Turn Out the Lights," something like that. Pendergrass.
Okay,
that was his last name. So. One of the things that he did, he had a show where it was all women, no men allowed. So Teddy Pendergrass, singing in front of hundreds of women there, and it's such a cool move. So I don't know if you're doing like a one-man show. I think it's just ladies only.
Well, it's kind of like that anyway, because I guess basically get like millions of TERFs turning up at any stand-up act I do. So it's kind of good anyway. But then I get to all my kind of like material that's about being maybe not the best man that I could be, and they get really annoyed at it. And it's like, I'm sorry, in the end, I am just a comedian or just a comedy writer, and I'll always go where the jokes are,
Yeah, and you can't pick your failed allies. So we're all we're all there.
Exactly.
Well, Graham, thank you so much for spending some time with me. Your book is Tough Crowd, and as you said, it looks like we can still watch a lot of the episodes of the great comedy that you made over the years, except for one that might be a little tough to find. And
no, you should be able to get that one too, as long as it's not on Channel 4.
There we go. And anything you'd like to say, or where people can find your work? Any plans for the future?
I have a Substack where we kind of publish regular updates on what's going on in this fight, and I'm going to be trying to do stuff that's a little bit more kind of fun, I guess. Movie reviews, TV reviews, stuff like that. So go to the Glinner Update if you want. If you want.
Yeah, I'll have a link in the description. And
excellent.